Imagine stepping onto a plane with a valid first-class ticket, only to have it torn in half before you can even sit down. Imagine being told, in front of an entire cabin, that you do not belong there. Phones lift, whispers ripple, humiliation spreads like wildfire. But what if the woman at the center of it all was not just any passenger? What if she secretly owned nearly half the airline? This is the story of Maya Carter, a woman calm yet unshakably strong. She chose silence when others expected anger, observation when others expected retreat. What no one knew, not the flight attendant, not the captain, not even the executive scrambling behind the scenes, was that with one phone call, she could shift the balance of power before the plane even left the ground. But this is more than a story about humiliation. It is about the machinery of prejudice, the hidden networks of control, and one woman's decision to fight back, not only for herself, but for every passenger who has ever been told they do not belong. So stay with us, like this video, share it with others, and subscribe to the channel, because what you're about to witness will change the way you look at power, justice, and the skies above. The first-class cabin always smelled faintly of leather and citrus polish, the kind of artificial cleanliness that promised comfort but never quite masked the weight of human judgment. Maya Carter stepped through the doorway with her usual quiet grace, boarding pass tucked between her fingers, a worn leather crossbody bag slung over her shoulder. She moved slowly, almost deliberately, like someone who had done this hundreds of times before. And she had. These flights had become a private ritual, her way of slipping beneath the surface of her own company, of seeing the culture unfiltered, without the veneer of shareholder meetings or glossy annual reports. Most passengers saw a tall black woman in jeans and a soft sweater, hair tied back in a low bun, no makeup, no entourage. To them, she blended in. To Maya, that invisibility was the point. She wanted to be observed, measured, sometimes judged. The truth about an airline was never written in glossy brochures. It was in the way crew members treated the quiet ones, the ones who didn't look like they belonged. She stopped at seat 2A, her favorite spot. A window seat, wide leather cushion, the armrest cool beneath her palm. She placed her bag neatly under the seat, slid her notebook from the side pocket, and opened it to a blank page. She always wrote during boarding scribbled observations, fragments of overheard conversations, little things that revealed more than any quarterly report. The boarding process around her was smooth. Flight attendants greeted passengers with practiced smiles. Travelers shuffled down the aisle. Voices rose and fell like background music. Then he appeared, Daniel Reeves, head flight attendant. His uniform was impeccable pressed navy jacket, silver wings pinned sharp above his chest pocket. His expression, however, carried none of the warmth his uniform promised. He moved with clipped efficiency, scanning boarding passes, directing passengers with a voice that left little room for kindness. When his eyes landed on Maya, something shifted. It was subtle at first, a pause, a narrowing of his gaze, the tightening of his jaw. He glanced at her ticket, then at her face, then back again. "Let me see that again," he said flatly. Maya looked up from her notebook. Calm. She handed him the pass without a word. Daniel studied it, his eyes moving slowly over the print. His expression hardened, like a verdict forming in his mind before he even reached the end of the ticket. He looked at her again, this time with a kind of clinical appraisal that felt less like procedure and more like judgment. "This doesn't seem right," he muttered, loud enough for the older couple in 2B to turn their heads. Maya kept her voice steady, her tone even, careful. It's a valid first-class ticket. For a brief moment, she thought that would be enough, that he'd nod curtly and move on. But Daniel didn't move on. Instead, with deliberate slowness, he gripped the ticket on both ends, held it just long enough for the nearby passengers to notice, and then tore it cleanly in half. The sound was small, paper against paper, but the reaction was not. Gas rippled through the cabin. Phones lifted almost instantly. Passengers frozen mid-motion. The hum of the overhead vents was suddenly louder than breathing. Maya's fingers tightened around her pen, the one resting on her notebook. For the briefest moment, her mind flashed with the urge to stand, to demand, to shout. But she didn't. She swallowed the heat rising in her chest and let the silence do its work. Silence, she knew, could sometimes scream louder than rage. Daniel leaned closer, his voice carrying just enough to reach the other rows. "You don't belong here." The words hung in the air like smoke. No one spoke. Not the couple beside her, not the businessman across the aisle, not the crew member pretending to check overhead bins. Maya closed her notebook carefully, slid it back into her bag, and rose slowly. Her movements were measured, deliberate. She would not give them the spectacle they expected. She would not give Daniel the satisfaction of seeing her break. "Gather your belongings," Daniel ordered. As he stepped closer, his shoulder brushed hers. Not a collision, not enough to leave evidence, but enough to send a message. A shove dressed as procedure. Maya's heart hammered against her ribs, but her face betrayed nothing. She bent to retrieve her bag, slipping her pen inside with one last note scribbled hastily. Tone, volume, crowd reaction. Every detail mattered. As she turned toward the aisle, she caught sight of something unusual. Near row 4, a man in a hooded sweatshirt held his phone high, angled perfectly at her. Not furtive, not clumsy, but steady, intentional. His eyes met hers for a fraction of a second. He did not lower the phone. He wanted her to see. Daniel's voice carried again, sharp, official. "We'll have security meet us at the gate." Murmurs swelled. Some passengers averted their eyes, ashamed. Others leaned in, caught up in the theater of it all, their lenses following her down the aisle. Maya kept her pace slow, calm, every step a refusal to let them write her story for her. Her silence was her protest, her dignity, her shield. Inside, though, the conflict was real. A storm raged beneath her composed exterior. Should I speak now? Should I unleash the truth that I own nearly half this airline? That one phone call could end his career before the wheels even left the ground. Would it feel good to watch his arrogance collapse under the weight of my power? Or would it feel small, a victory too cheap for the humiliation he had tried to orchestrate? She breathed deeply, steadying herself. No, not yet. Power used too early becomes theater. She needed precision. She needed timing. The jet bridge was colder than the cabin, the metal walls echoing with the shuffle of her footsteps. 2 security officers waited at the gate, eyes flicking between her and Daniel. He stepped forward, presenting the torn boarding pass like a piece of evidence. "Passenger from 2A," he announced. "Improper documentation. Possible seat tampering." Maya remained silent, her hands resting lightly on her bag. The officers studied her, then the pass, then Daniel. One of them reached for his radio. Behind them, footsteps echoed. The man in the hoodie emerged, still filming, lens steady, unwavering. His presence was not coincidence. His purpose was too deliberate. Maya understood then this was not humiliation by chance. This was choreography, a script written long before she stepped onto this flight. And someone with more power than Daniel was pulling the strings. As the security officers gestured for her to follow, Maya felt the weight of every camera, every whisper, every judgment pressing against her skin. But she also felt something else rising in her chest. Not rage, not despair, resolve, because what Daniel Reeves, what the hooded cameraman, what even the CEO of the airline didn't know, was that Maya Carter never played by anyone else's script. This wasn't the end of her story. It was only the opening act. The metal walls of the jet bridge seemed to hum louder with every step. Maya Carter felt the shift in atmosphere immediately. The warmth of the cabin was gone. Here, the air was colder, sharper, carrying with it the faint tang of jet fuel and disinfectant. The noise of boarding passengers faded behind her, replaced by the hollow echo of her footsteps. At the end of the bridge, 2 airport security officers stood waiting, their posture rigid, eyes scanning her with a mix of suspicion and resignation. They had been briefed, she realized. This wasn't improvisation. Someone had called ahead before she even left her seat. Daniel Reeves walked half a step behind her, his shoulders squared, his voice already rehearsed in his throat. He held the torn boarding pass like it was a badge of honor, proof of his authority. "Passenger from 2A," he announced, his voice firm, carrying in the tight space improper documentation, possible seat tampering. The words landed heavily, as if they were fact, not accusation. One officer reached for the boarding pass, studying the torn halves with a frown. The other tilted his radio toward his mouth, ready to escalate. Maya stood still. Her bag rested lightly against her hip, her hands calm at her sides. She said nothing. She had learned long ago that silence in moments like this was not weakness. Silence was a mirror. It forced others to reveal themselves, to fill the space with their own assumptions. But her silence did not still her thoughts. Inside, her mind was a storm of calculation. Should I speak now? Should I pull back the curtain and show them who I am? Would their expressions change if they knew the woman they were corralling like a trespasser owned nearly half this company? Would Daniel's smirk vanish if he realized that a single phone call from me could end his career, or would they dig their heels in deeper, too proud to admit they had crossed the wrong person? The questions pressed against her ribs like sharp stones, but she held them there. Timing mattered. One wrong word too early could transform her power into arrogance, and arrogance was what they expected from her. Behind them, footsteps echoed, slow, deliberate. Maya turned her head just enough to see the man in the hooded sweatshirt emerge from the cabin. His phone was still raised, the lens steady, unwavering. He did not hide what he was doing. He wanted to be seen. He wanted her to know she was being recorded. Their eyes met. For a second, it felt as if the world narrowed to the small distance between them. His gaze was not curious, not accidental. It was intent, purposeful. Daniel noticed him too, but said nothing. Instead, he gestured toward the officers. "Take her to the holding room. We'll sort this out there." The officers exchanged a glance. One of them shifted uneasily, the slightest crack in the mask of procedure. The other nodded, motioning for Maya to walk ahead. She did. The corridor beyond the jet bridge was quiet, muffled compared to the chaos of boarding gates. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a pale glow on beige walls. Doors lined the narrow hallway, most closed. A few left ajar, revealing glimpses of offices cluttered with papers and radios. The officer led her to one of the doors at the far end. He pushed it open, revealing a small room with no windows, only a metal table and 3 chairs. The kind of room designed not for comfort, but for control. Maya stepped inside. The door closed behind her with a click that felt louder than it should have been. She sat, slowly, deliberately. Her bag remained at her side, her fingers brushing the leather strap for grounding. The silence of the room pressed in on her ears. It was the kind of silence that made a person want to explain themselves, to fill the void. Maya resisted. She would not fill the silence for them. Moments later, the door opened again. Daniel entered, placing the torn boarding pass on the table like evidence in a trial. His expression was controlled, but his eyes betrayed something sharper, a flicker of satisfaction. He leaned forward, his palms flat against the table. "You can make this easier on yourself. Tell us how you got that seat." Maya looked at him, her expression unreadable. Inside, her pulse pounded, but her voice, when she finally spoke, was even quiet, precise. "It was assigned to me, the same way seats are assigned to every passenger." Daniel's lips curved, not into a smile, but into something colder. "People like you don't usually end up in 2A. The words were casual, spoken as if they were a joke, only he found amusing. But they carried weight, a heavy historical weight that pressed into the room like a shadow. Before Maya could reply, the door opened again. A young woman stepped inside. Her hair was neatly pinned, her uniform slightly rumpled from the rush of boarding. Sofia Alvarez. Maya recognized her from the cabin, the attendant who had offered polite smiles while Daniel wielded authority like a weapon. "Your bag, ma'am," Sofia said aloud, her voice carrying just enough for the room's cameras to capture. She set it on the table, her hands steady, but as she placed it down, her fingers brushed the side pocket, sliding something inside. Maya felt it instantly, the faint outline of a plastic card pressed against the fabric. Sofia's eyes flicked up, just for a moment, and in that brief glance Maya saw guilt, fear, and something else. Courage. "I'm sorry," Sofia whispered so softly it almost blended with the hum of the overhead vent. "This isn't right." And then she was gone, the door closing behind her as if she had never been there. Maya's fingers moved casually to the pocket, brushing the edge of the card. A crew ID, not hers, not Sofia's either. Her heart tightened. This was bigger than humiliation. This was machinery. Someone had engineered this moment, step by step, and Sofia had just slipped her a piece of the puzzle. Daniel sat back in his chair, oblivious. He thought he had already won. Maya folded her hands on the table, her expression calm, her mind racing. She replayed every detail of the past 30 minutes, the boarding pass, the cameras, the shove in the aisle, the hooded cameraman. It wasn't random. It was choreography. And if it was choreography, then somewhere, someone was conducting the music. The door opened again. This time, a tall man with salt and pepper hair and wire-rimmed glasses stepped inside, carrying a slim notebook. He spoke with quiet authority. "My name is Dr. Thomas Green. I was in seat 4C. I saw what happened, and I'm staying until this is resolved." The officers exchanged looks. Daniel frowned, but Maya allowed herself the faintest flicker of relief. For the first time since boarding, she wasn't alone. She met Dr. Green's eyes, and in them, she saw something rare. Not pity, not curiosity, but solidarity. For a moment, she let herself breathe. Just a little, but the reprieve was brief, because deep down, Maya knew this was only the beginning. The room was smaller than it looked at first glance. Beige walls pressed close, the single fluorescent light overhead buzzing faintly as if it too disapproved of the situation. A metal table dominated the center, its surface scratched with faint grooves from years of use. There were 3 chairs, 2 on one side, 1 on the other. The arrangement was obvious. This was not a place for conversation. It was a place for control. Maya Carter lowered herself into the lone chair, her back straight, her bag resting by her side. The silence in the room was heavy, almost calculated. She felt the hum of the vent above her, the faint vibration of footsteps in the hallway, the shifting of weight from the security officer stationed outside. She noted everything. It was her habit, her discipline. Observing details gave her balance. She did not have to wait long. The door opened and Daniel Reeves stepped inside, still holding the torn halves of her boarding pass like a trophy. He placed them on the table, aligning the edges neatly as if their destruction had not already rendered them meaningless. He sat opposite her, leaning forward with both elbows on the table. His face was set, his voice prepared. "You should tell us how you got that seat," he said. His tone suggested accusation dressed as routine. Maya's gaze did not waver. She kept her hands folded, her expression calm. Inside, however, her thoughts shifted rapidly. Every word matters, every glance. What story are they building? What role am I being forced to play? "I was assigned that seat," she answered evenly, "the same way every passenger is assigned theirs." Daniel leaned back slightly, his lips curving into something that wasn't quite a smile. "It's unusual," he said. "People like you do not usually end up in 2A." The words landed with deliberate weight. He wanted them to sting. He wanted the cameras hidden in the corners to record her reaction. Maya inhaled slowly, then exhaled. She offered nothing more. The door opened again. Sofia Alvarez entered, her uniform slightly creased from the rush of boarding. She carried Maya's bag with careful hands. Her voice was polite, loud enough to reach the microphones in the ceiling. "Your bag, ma'am." She set it on the table and stepped back, her posture neutral. But as she moved past Maya, her fingers brushed the side pocket of the bag with subtle pressure. Maya felt the shape instantly. A card, plastic, thin, the corners sharp against the fabric. Sofia's lips barely moved as she leaned close enough for only Maya to hear, "I'm sorry. This isn't right." Then she straightened and left without another glance. Her professional mask firmly in place, Maya reached casually into the side pocket of her bag, her fingertips grazing the object Sofia had slipped inside, a crew identification card. She held it just long enough to feel the embossed edges before sliding her hand away, careful not to draw attention. Her pulse quickened. This was a message, a clue, a risk Sofia had taken knowing full well what it might cost her. Daniel noticed nothing. He tapped the boarding pass on the table with 2 fingers. "Improper documentation," he repeated, as though saying it enough times would turn it into truth. The door opened again. A tall man entered this time, his salt and pepper hair combed neatly, wire-rimmed glasses perched on his nose. He carried a slim notebook, the kind academics favored. His voice was calm, deliberate. "My name is Dr. Thomas Green. I was in seat 4C. I saw what happened, and I will stay until this is resolved." The officers outside shifted uneasily. Daniel frowned, his composure faltering for the briefest moment. He had not expected a witness to follow them here. Maya turned her head toward Dr. Green. His expression was steady, not pitying, not curious, but resolute. She felt a flicker of gratitude. For the first time since Daniel had torn her boarding pass, she was not entirely alone. "Doctor," Green pulled out the chair beside her and sat down. He opened his notebook and began writing, his pen scratching deliberately across the page. Every detail, every exchange. He was recording it. The silence thickened again until it was broken by the arrival of another figure. This one wore a suit, his tie neatly knotted, his shoes polished to a mirror shine. His name tag gleamed, Brian Cole, Customer Service Manager. His smile was thin, practiced. Miss Carter. He began smoothly, sliding into the chair across from her. Maya raised an eyebrow. She had not given her name. "That is interesting," she said softly. "I do not recall introducing myself." Brian's smile did not falter. "We have records," he replied. His voice was gentle but rehearsed, each word chosen to sound reasonable. "We just want to make this right. A gesture of goodwill. Perhaps a voucher. First class. Anywhere we fly." The offer was spoken like a gift, but Maya heard what it really was, a bribe, a way to silence her before the story left this room. She folded her hands more tightly, her gaze fixed on him. "No." Brian leaned forward, lowering his voice. "It is the quickest way to move past this. No paperwork, no delays. Doctor—" Green cleared his throat, his voice calm but firm. "She has not even had the chance to give her side. And you already know her name." Brian's smile flickered, the mask slipping just enough to reveal tension beneath. His eyes darted toward Daniel, then back to Maya. "We will come back to this," he said quickly. Then he rose, his shoes clicking against the tile as he left the room. The silence he left behind was heavier than before. Maya finally allowed herself to reach into her bag, her fingers brushing the stolen crew ID. She slid it out slowly beneath the table, holding it in her palm out of view of the cameras. The photo on the card was Daniel Reeves, his smirk, his sharp jawline, unmistakable. But the name printed beneath was not his. It read, Marissa Clark. Her breath caught for half a second. The embedded chip data, she suspected, would not match either of them, which meant someone inside the airline was recycling old credentials, disguising access, creating layers of misdirection. She slipped the card back into her bag, her expression unchanged, but her mind spun. This was not just humiliation. This was structure, systematic, coordinated. "Doctor." Green glanced at her notebook, then back at her. "You found something," he murmured. Maya nodded almost imperceptibly. A trail, and trails led somewhere. The door opened once more. A woman entered, her navy suit tailored perfectly, her leather folio tucked beneath one arm. She moved with the confidence of someone used to steering conversations. She sat where Brian had been and opened the folio. "Rachel Knox, Corporate Communications," she said briskly. Her tone carried the precision of rehearsed crisis management. She laid a packet of papers on the table, clipped neatly, a pen resting on top. "This is our settlement agreement. Standard terms. We will refund your ticket, offer a $5,000 travel credit, and a formal apology letter. In exchange, you sign this agreement and agree not to pursue further action." She pushed the packet toward Maya, her eyes cool, watchful. Maya did not touch it. Instead, she looked at Dr. Green, who shook his head slowly. "Interesting," Maya said finally. She flipped open the packet, scanning the clipped pages. "You prepared this without taking my statement." "It is the cleanest resolution for all parties," Rachel replied smoothly. Maya's phone, still in airplane mode, vibrated as soon as she switched it on. Notifications flooded in, messages from Elijah Grant lighting up the screen. She glanced down discreetly. Internal emails circulating, Labels you disruptive passenger. Attached was a file. A mass email had gone out to security and PR, framing her as a safety risk. The phrasing was deliberate. It tilted perception before any investigation could even begin. Maya placed the phone face down on the table. She looked at Rachel, her voice calm but unyielding. "Your offer is noted, but I decline. I prefer the official process. Statements, evidence, independent review." Rachel's smile thinned, her professional mask cracking just slightly. "That will be considerably more complicated." "I can handle complicated," Maya replied. Rachel gathered her folio, rising with mechanical grace. "We will proceed as you wish." But her eyes betrayed something colder. Annoyance, perhaps even fear. When she left, the silence returned. But it was no longer the silence of control. It was the silence before change. Maya sat back, her hand resting lightly on the bag beside her. Inside, the crew ID pressed against the lining, its weight symbolic, proof of a game larger than the one being played in this small room. She thought of the edited videos already hitting social media, the smear email labeling her disruptive. She thought of Sophia's whispered apology, Dr. Green's patient presence, Brian Cole's forced smile. A pattern was forming. Humiliate, mislabel, silence. But they were underestimating her. They were forgetting one thing. Maya Carter did not stop halfway. The fluorescent light hummed overhead, casting the room in a cold white glare. Maya Carter sat still, her fingers resting lightly on the edge of her notebook, the pages blank but waiting. Across from her, Dr. Thomas Green leaned back, scribbling notes with his calm, deliberate hand. For a moment, the room felt suspended in time, balanced between silence and the echo of what had just been said. Rachel Knox had left behind the scent of expensive perfume and the neat folder of a settlement agreement, the kind of document meant to erase people rather than protect them. The pages lay closed now, untouched in the center of the table, their presence a silent provocation. Maya stared at them, her mind circling. The offer was clear: refund, travel credit, an apology crafted by corporate lawyers, all in exchange for her silence. It was efficient, it was sterile, and it was deeply insulting. Inside, her thoughts wrestled with one another. What if I signed? What if I accepted the voucher, the apology, and walked away? Would it make life simpler? Would it protect me from the storm I feel coming? Or would it mean letting every person who ever sat in 2A with skin like mine be erased, written off as disruptive, silenced before their story was even told? The inner voice was tempting. After all, she had spent years carefully guarding her privacy, staying behind the curtain of her investments, never inviting the spotlight. But the memory of Daniel Reeves tearing her boarding pass in half replayed in her mind, sharp and humiliating. The sound of paper ripping still rang in her ears. No. Silence was what they wanted. And silence was the one thing she could not give. The door opened again. This time, Brian Cole returned. He carried himself with that same thin smile, the practiced ease of a man who had smoothed over more incidents than he could count. His tie was slightly loosened now, as though he wanted to project casual empathy. "Miss Carter," he began, sliding into the chair across from her, "I understand this has been stressful. Our priority is to resolve this quickly and respectfully." Maya did not reply immediately. She waited, forcing him to fill the silence. Brian gestured toward the folder. "Rachel may have been a bit brisk, but the company's intentions are genuine. We do not want this to escalate. These things can get messy once social media gets involved. A voucher, a refund, a written apology, surely that is more than fair. Maya's eyes flicked toward him. Her voice, when it came, was measured. You knew my name before I ever spoke it. You prepared a settlement before hearing my side. Tell me, Mr. Cole, how does one resolve a case before it begins? Brian's smile faltered, but only slightly. We have records, he said again, the same line he had used earlier. But his eyes betrayed a flicker of unease. Dr. Green closed his notebook softly and spoke for the first time in minutes. She is not a disruptive passenger. I was there. I saw everything. She complied. She remained calm. And your head attendant escalated the situation deliberately. Brian's jaw tightened. He glanced toward the camera in the corner of the room, then back to Maya. Doctor, I respect your position, but this is an internal matter. The airline will conduct its review. Maya leaned forward, her voice low but steady. Internal reviews that bury complaints, that erase evidence, that stamp insufficient documentation and close the file. Brian's eyes snapped to hers. The mask slipped, just for a moment. He looked at her differently now, not as a passenger to be managed, but as someone who had seen behind the curtain. Before he could respond, Maya's phone buzzed again. She glanced down discreetly. Another message from Elijah Grant. Videos spreading online. First uploads cut the audio, where he said you don't belong here. Someone edited them. Controlling narrative. Be careful. Maya's stomach sank. She tapped the link Elijah had attached. A video filled her screen. It showed Daniel confronting her in the aisle, holding her boarding pass. His lips moved, forming words she knew too well. But the audio had been cut. Instead of his sharp insult, there was silence. The footage made her look stubborn, uncooperative, as though she were standing against an innocent crew member. Stripped of context, it painted her as the problem. Her fingers tightened around the phone. They are not just silencing me in this room. They are rewriting the story outside of it. She placed the phone face down and exhaled slowly. Every step had been choreographed. The torn boarding pass, the shove, the hooded cameraman, the settlement, and now the edited footage. Someone higher than Daniel Reeves was orchestrating this, moving pieces on a board she had only begun to glimpse. Brian's voice broke her thoughts. You cannot win this, he said softly, almost kindly. Even if you fight, by the time the review is done, the story will already be set. The public will see what we show them. The safest thing you can do for yourself, for your reputation, is sign the agreement. Maya studied him, her silence deliberate. Inside, her heart pounded with conflict. Part of her wanted to slam her hands on the table, to tell him exactly who she was, to watch his composure crumble when he realized he was threatening the woman who controlled nearly half the company. But another part of her whispered caution. Revealing too much now would only tip her hand. Power wielded too early could be turned against her. She breathed deeply, steadying herself. Her voice, when it came, was soft but unyielding. No. Brian opened his mouth to reply, but before he could, the door opened again. Daniel Reeves stepped back inside, his expression triumphant. Security is waiting, he said, looking at Maya like a hunter who had cornered his prey. Maya rose slowly, lifting her bag from the floor. She slipped her notebook back inside, the stolen crew ID pressed against the fabric like a secret burning to be revealed. Her face remained calm, but inside, her resolve solidified. They thought they had already contained her. They thought she would fold under the weight of edited footage and corporate agreements. But what they did not know was that Maya Carter had spent her life preparing for battles exactly like this. As she walked past Daniel, she felt his eyes on her, smug and assured. She did not flinch. She did not break stride. She simply whispered under her breath, low enough that only she could hear, "This is not over." And in her chest, the words echoed with truth. This was not the end of the story. It was only the sharpening of the blade. The holding room emptied after Brian Cole and Daniel Reeves left. For the first time since the confrontation began, Maya Carter was alone with her thoughts. The fluorescent light buzzed above her, the sound almost taunting in its monotony. She reached into her bag and drew out the crew ID Sofia Alvarez had slipped her. The card's plastic edges pressed into her palm. Daniel's face stared back at her from the photo, but the name beneath it read Marissa Clark. Maya turned it over, examining every detail. The laminate had small scratches, as if it had been used for months. Yet she knew Marissa Clark. The name tugged at her memory. Clark had been terminated more than a year ago after a supposed breach of procedure. Maya had signed off on her severance package herself, quietly wondering even then if something about her dismissal had been off. She slipped the card back into her bag and took out her phone. It was risky, but she needed clarity. She tapped open the encrypted app Elijah Grant had built years ago, the one only a handful of people in the company even knew existed. The line pulsed twice before his voice came through, calm but sharp, the voice of a man who had spent decades navigating storms. "Maya," he said. "I've been waiting for your call." "Elijah," she replied quietly. "I need everything. Every complaint record involving crew misconduct or discrimination in the past 5 years, and I need it now." There was a pause, then the faint shuffle of papers on his end. "I'll send the files. But be careful. Someone is moving against you from the inside. I've seen the chatter. Your name has already been circulated, framed as a disruptive passenger. They're setting the stage to make you the problem." Maya closed her eyes for a moment. "I know. They're already editing the videos." "You'll have the files in 30 minutes, Elijah said firmly. "But listen to me. There's a leak. Someone in our executive circle is feeding information to the wrong people. I don't know who yet. Watch your back." The line went dead. Maya slipped the phone into her bag just as the door opened. "Dr." Thomas Green re-entered, his notebook under his arm. He studied her face with quiet concern. "You found something," he said softly. "More than something," she replied. Her voice carried the weight of certainty. "I found a trail. Doctor." Green sat across from her, his expression steady. "They won't stop easily. You know that, don't you?" Maya nodded. "I don't expect them to, but they've underestimated me. They always do." Her phone buzzed again. A secure file from Elijah had arrived. She opened it, scrolling through incident summaries. Each one chilled her. Passenger complaints filed mid-flight, accusations of discriminatory treatment, claims of verbal humiliation, unnecessary removals, even physical shoves. Each case ended the same way. Insufficient evidence, closed without action. Maya's eyes narrowed as she reached one name that appeared again and again. Daniel Reeves. 3 separate cases tied to him, all dismissed. She exhaled slowly, her chest tightening with anger. The pattern was undeniable. Evidence had been disappearing for years. Complaints were buried, and Reeves had been protected. She turned the screen toward Dr. Green. "Look at this. 3 complaints naming him directly. All closed. All erased before they could damage the company's record. Doctor. Green leaned forward, reading with a frown. It's systematic. Not negligence. This was intentional. Maya nodded. And now it's my turn. Her eyes drifted back to the ID card. Reeves's face with Clark's name. A terminated employee's identity repurposed, recycled, used as a mask. It was not just misconduct. It was fraud. A network hiding within the company, slipping through security, disguising access with layers of obfuscation. Her pulse quickened as she connected the pieces. If Reeves's ID carried Clark's name, then someone in HR or security had to be complicit. Those records were supposed to be locked, archived, untouchable, which meant the cover-up reached higher than a rogue attendant. It reached into the very heart of the company's system. The door opened again. Brian Cole returned, this time with less of his practiced ease. He stood in the doorway, adjusting his tie, eyes darting between Maya and Dr. Green. Miss Carter, he said, his voice strained. We'd like you to move to a different area, a more private setting. Maya rose slowly, slipping her phone and notebook back into her bag. Her movements were calm, deliberate. She could feel the ID pressing against the fabric, heavier now with meaning. As they walked down the corridor, she noticed the man in the hooded sweatshirt again. He was leaning casually against the wall, still holding his phone, still recording. He met her gaze for a brief moment, then lowered the camera slightly. It was almost as if he was waiting for her to understand something he could not say aloud. They passed him, and Maya's mind sharpened with realization. The cameraman was not just a bystander. He was part of the choreography. His footage was too steady, too precise, his presence too convenient. Whoever had orchestrated this wanted his lens trained on her from the start. Brian led them to another room, larger than the first, with a window overlooking the concourse below. The terminal buzzed with activity, passengers shuffling between gates, unaware of the storm gathering just behind the glass. Inside, the tension thickened. Rachel Knox was already waiting, her folio open, her expression composed but taut. She gestured toward the chair. Miss Carter, please, sit. Maya sat, folding her hands on the table. Dr. Green remained by the door, his notebook open, his presence steady. Rachel spoke briskly. We have offered you a generous settlement. You declined. We respect that. But understand, the longer this goes on, the harder it will be for anyone to see you as the victim. The videos circulating online already show a very different story. Maya tilted her head, her voice calm. Because someone edited them. Rachel's eyes flickered, just for a second. Then her smile returned. Perception is reality. That is what matters in the public sphere. You should think carefully about how you wish to be perceived. Maya leaned back in her chair. Her voice was low, even, but it carried a razor edge. You want me to disappear? But you've made one mistake. Rachel raised an eyebrow. And what mistake is that? Maya looked directly into her eyes. You thought humiliation would silence me, but humiliation is fuel, and I intend to burn every falsehood you've built until nothing is left standing. The room fell silent. Even Rachel's composure faltered for the briefest heartbeat. Dr. Green closed his notebook with a soft snap. I suggest you prepare for her not to go quietly, he said. Maya rose, her bag slung across her shoulder, the ID card pressed against her side, the complaints file still glowing in her phone. She walked to the window, staring down at the bustling concourse. For the first time since boarding, she allowed herself a small smile. Not of victory, but of clarity. They had drawn the battle lines. They had underestimated her resolve. And now, she knew exactly where to strike. The second holding room was quieter than the first. The window overlooking the concourse gave Maya Carter a glimpse of ordinary life continuing outside families rolling suitcases, a business traveler tapping at his phone, a child pressing her face to the glass to watch planes taxi on the runway. The contrast was sharp. Out there, everything seemed normal. In here, it was anything but. Maya sat near the window, her bag by her side, her notebook closed, but waiting. Doctor, Thomas Green stood nearby, watchful, as though his presence alone could shield her from the machinery moving against her. The crew ID card burned metaphorically against her hip, a secret too powerful to reveal too soon. She felt the weight of timing pressing on her. Every instinct told her that waiting would allow them to tighten their net. She needed to act first. She needed to shift the game before it consumed her. She slipped her phone from her bag and opened the encrypted dialer Elijah Grant had installed years ago. A number lived in her memory, not in her contacts. She typed it carefully and pressed call. The line clicked twice before a voice answered. Federal Aviation Safety Board, the operator said crisply. Maya's voice was calm, measured. This is a passenger on Horizon Air Flight, 221 Atlanta to San Francisco. You have probable cause to inspect the crew for immediate operational compliance. Prioritize the head flight attendant. There was a pause on the other end. The faint sound of keys tapping. Your name. Ma'am Maya hesitated for less than a second. Anonymous for now. You have the information you need. Before the operator could press further, she ended the call. Then she immediately entered another number, one equally untraceable. Ethics Council for Commercial Aviation. Came the greeting. This is an urgent referral, Maya said steadily. Multiple prior incidents tied to crew member Daniel Reeves. Recommend removal pending safety evaluation. Acting now could prevent liability for the entire carrier. She ended the second call after less than a minute. Her pulse hammered, but her expression stayed calm. 2 calls, 75 seconds total. It was all it took to send ripples through the system. She placed the phone back in her bag and sat back in her chair. Dr. Green studied her, his brow furrowed. You're moving pieces, he said quietly. Maya offered the faintest smile. Pieces need to be moved before they fall. Minutes later, her phone buzzed with a secure message from Elijah. Watchgate B12, real-time updates. She exhaled slowly, steadying herself. 5 minutes passed before another buzz came. Boarding paused. Manifest updated. Daniel Reeves removed from crew assignment for immediate performance assessment. Maya felt a flicker of satisfaction. One call had rearranged the chain of command. But before she could savor the moment, another message arrived. Replacement FA assigned. Julian Cross. Orders signed by CFO Victor Hayes. Her satisfaction curdled into suspicion. The chief financial officer had no operational authority over crew assignments. His domain was numbers, budgets, forecasts, not staffing gates. Why was his signature on a crew change? She leaned forward, her thoughts sharpening. Unless Hayes's reach extended beyond finance, procurement contracts, vendor relationships, staffing agencies that fed temporary crew into the system, if he had control there, he could move people in and out of flights without tripping official audits. Doctor, Green noticed her frown. Something's wrong, he said. Victor Hayes just authorized a replacement crew member, Maya replied, her voice low. That should not be his role. Dr. Green scribbled the name in his notebook. Julian Cross. Have you heard of him before? Maya shook her head. No. which makes it worse. If Hayes handpicked him, this isn't about filling a role, it's about maintaining control. Before she could say more, the door opened. A security officer stepped inside, his expression uneasy. "Miss Carter," he said, his tone careful. "You're free to return to the concourse for now. We've been instructed to release you." Maya rose, slipping her bag over her shoulder. She could feel the officer's discomfort in every hesitant glance. He wanted to be anywhere but here. She thanked him quietly and walked out into the corridor. Dr. Green close behind. The terminal was different now. Gate B12 was no longer a place of orderly boarding. The atmosphere was tense, buzzing with rumors. The jet bridge door was sealed shut. A uniformed guard posted like a sentry. Passengers clustered in confused groups, their voices rising over the announcements for other flights. Beyond the ropes, cameras had arrived. Reporters pressed forward with microphones, tripods sprouting like weeds. Every move of an airline uniform drew a pivot of lenses. Maya's phone buzzed again. Elijah's secure message appeared. Media catching wind. Finance blogs speculating about an in-flight disruption. Stock ticker sliding. She felt a pang of frustration. Every second she stayed silent. The story was being written without her. Then another buzz, this time from an anonymous sender. A single subject line appeared, "Consider." Maya opened the folder cautiously. Inside were 3 PDF complaint reports, each stamped closed, insufficient evidence. Each one named Daniel Reeves. Her pulse quickened as she read. The incidents were nearly identical. Passengers of color targeted. Minor disagreements escalated into removals. Crew safety cited as justification. In one, a passenger described hearing a male voice over the intercom authorizing their removal before the confrontation even began. A fourth file was a video. Maya pressed play. It was the incident from earlier that day. Uncut. Full audio intact. She watched Reeves hold her boarding pass, his voice sharp. "You don't belong here." But layered beneath, faint yet distinct, came another voice, filtered through his earpiece. Older, deeper, calm with authority. "Do it now. Make it clean." Maya replayed the moment twice, isolating the faint command. It was not Reeves's voice. Someone else had given the order. Her suspicion hardened into clarity. Reeves had not acted alone. He had been directed, fed his line, instructed when to strike. "Doctor." Green leaned over her shoulder, his eyes narrowing as he listened. "That voice, it's not his." "No," Maya whispered. "It belongs to someone who thinks they're untouchable." The media crush outside the gate swelled. Voices overlapping, cameras flashing. Elijah's message buzzed again. "You should speak now before they rewrite the whole story without you." Maya exhaled, steadying herself. She pulled a slim black device from her bag, one the public could not buy. It connected directly to a private uplink, a safeguard she carried for moments just like this. Within seconds, her face appeared on the feed of one of the largest independent news networks in the country. The reporters outside the ropes froze, their microphones lowering as they turned toward the monitor showing her live broadcast. "This morning," Maya began, her voice steady despite the chaos around her, "I was removed from my first-class seat without cause. My name is Maya Carter. I am a 46% shareholder of Horizon Air, and I am calling for an immediate emergency meeting of our board of directors to address systemic misconduct within this company." Gas rippled through the crowd. Even some of the reporters seemed stunned, recalibrating their questions. Passengers craned their necks to watch the monitors. Somewhere, Maya knew, Victor Hayes and Martin Doyle were watching too. Their grip on the story had just slipped. Her phone buzzed again. Elijah's warning appeared. "Brace yourself. They're hitting back." Maya opened the link he attached. A financial blog notorious for laundering corporate smears had just published an article. The headline blared, "Carter a shadow figure for offshore consortium." Her stomach tightened as she skimmed. The piece claimed she was not the true owner of her stake. It painted her as a front for an unnamed foreign investment group, hinted at regulatory violations, and quoted anonymous insiders questioning her legitimacy. The comments section was already split. Half applauded her courage. The other half parroted the blog's insinuations. Maya closed the article and steadied her breath. This is the game. Then, humiliation inside, smear outside, but they forget I don't stop halfway. She looked up at the cameras still trained on her, the reporters waiting for her next move. Her resolve solidified. "Emergency meeting," she repeated quietly into her encrypted line to Elijah. "Today, no delays, because if Hayes and Doyle thought a shadow of doubt could erase her, they were about to learn just how wrong they were. The terminal was alive with chaos." Maya Carter could feel it in the air, a current of tension that wrapped around every word spoken, every glance exchanged. Gate B-12 had become more than a boarding area. It was a stage. The jet bridge was sealed. Security clustered like guards at a barricade, and just beyond the ropes reporters pressed in, their lenses catching every flicker of movement. Passengers murmured in huddled groups, some whispering in sympathy, others eager for the drama. Phones were everywhere, tilted upward to record, to broadcast, to judge. Maya stood near the cordon, her bag resting against her side, her posture straight. Her live broadcast had already sent shockwaves across the terminal. People had stopped walking mid-step when her voice echoed from the monitors above the gates. They stared, jaws slack, as she introduced herself not as a disruptive passenger, but as a 46% shareholder of Horizon Air. The silence that had followed had been delicious. Even now, she could still feel the ripple of disbelief traveling through the crowd. She was not who they thought she was, but triumph was fleeting. Her phone buzzed again, and the screen filled with the smear piece Elijah had warned her about. The headline screamed its accusation in bold letters, "Carter a shadow figure for offshore consortium." Maya scanned the article quickly, her pulse steady despite the precision of the attack. It was not clumsy. It had been written with care, calculated to plant seeds of doubt. Anonymous insiders claimed she was a front for a foreign group, her ownership questioned, her integrity cast in shadow. The article never accused outright, but it did not have to. Suggestion was more powerful than fact in moments like this. She scrolled to the comments. Divided voices clashed below. Some defended her, applauding her courage, while others seized on the insinuations, eager to believe the worst. A voice inside her whispered that this was too much, that maybe she should retreat, regroup, and fight in private. But she silenced the thought quickly. That was what they wanted. They wanted her hidden, her power reduced to rumor, her silence their shield. The hum of voices around her grew louder as the news spread. A young man near the gate lifted his phone toward her. "Is it true?" he shouted. "Do you even own what you say you own?" Maya met his eyes calmly. "The truth will outlast the lies," she said softly. The answer was not for him. It was for everyone listening. "Doctor." Thomas Green moved closer to her side, his notebook in hand, his voice quiet enough for only her to hear. "They are striking too fast. That article was ready before you even spoke. Maya nodded. Which means the decision to smear me was made before this morning. They planned the humiliation and the cover story together. Her phone buzzed again. Another secure message from Elijah. Stock dipping, internal chatter. Doyle calling for calm. Hayes unseen but moving pieces. Be ready. She exhaled. Calm was the CEO's language. Neutral statements meant to soothe shareholders while the rot spread beneath. But Hayes's silence was louder. He had moved quickly to replace Reeves, and now his fingerprints were on the public attack. Reporters broke through the rope line, security struggling to hold them back. One woman with a microphone leaned forward. Miss Carter, can you respond to the claims in the article? Are you the real owner of your shares? Maya turned to face the crowd fully. Her voice carried clearly, firm but even. Every share I own was acquired through legitimate, documented transactions. My holdings are clean. But understand this. The truth of my ownership is not what they fear. What they fear is accountability. The reporters pressed closer, shouting questions, their voices overlapping. Who gave the order to remove you from the flight? Do you plan to sue the airline? Will you step down from your position in the company? Maya raised a hand slightly, not to silence them, but to create space. The answers will come, she said, but not in sound bites. The board of directors will hear the truth today. And when they do, the people responsible will be held accountable. The crowd erupted in more questions, but Maya turned away, her pace steady as she moved toward the glass wall overlooking the runway. For a moment, she let her gaze rest on the horizon where the planes lined up for takeoff. Inside, her thoughts battled. Do I have enough? Do I have the strength to carry this through when they will throw everything at me? They have already painted me as illegitimate. What comes next? Will they reach for my family, my past? Anything they can twist. The fear was real. It pulsed through her veins, an honest acknowledgement of what was at stake. But beneath it, stronger, was something else. Resolve. She had not come this far to be erased by whispers. She turned back to Dr. Green. I need to move quickly. Every second I wait, they tighten the noose. He nodded, then act. Before they cut off your breath completely. Maya pulled her phone from her bag and opened the secure line to Elijah. His voice answered instantly. I am here. Set the board meeting, she said. Today. No delays. Elijah hesitated. The optics will be brutal. Hayes will smear you harder. Doyle will try to play the statesman, urging patience. I do not care, Maya replied. The longer we wait, the stronger their story becomes. If we move now, while the footage is still raw, while passengers are still talking, we can turn the tide. There was a pause. Then Elijah's steady voice. Very well. Consider it done. But Maya, be ready. They will not go quietly. The line went dead. Maya slipped her phone back into her bag and straightened her shoulders. Around her, the terminal buzzed louder than ever. Cameras still flashing. Reporters still pressing questions. She ignored them now. Her focus had shifted beyond the concourse. Her battlefield was moving to the boardroom, and she knew the stakes would only rise. She turned to Dr. Green one last time. Thank you for standing with me. His eyes were kind, but steady. This is not just your fight. It is bigger than you, bigger than me. If you win, others win too. Maya held his gaze for a long moment before finally nodding. She turned toward the exit, her stride calm but purposeful. The cameras followed, capturing every step. Behind her, the smear piece circulated through phones and tablets, spreading like wildfire. But ahead of her, the boardroom waited. And in that room, She would face Hayes and Doyle directly. As she walked through the terminal, passengers parted instinctively. Some watched in awe, others in suspicion, but none ignored her. Her silence was no longer misinterpreted as weakness. It had become gravity, pulling every eye toward her. For the first time all day, Maya allowed herself the smallest thought of satisfaction. They wanted her humiliated, diminished, erased. Instead, they had given her a platform, and she intended to use it. The headquarters of Horizon Air was designed to impress. The boardroom stretched like a cathedral of glass and chrome, a 40-foot table reflecting the skyline beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. The view was meant to remind anyone sitting here of power, reach, and permanence. But today, Maya Carter intended to remind them of something else: accountability. She walked into the room with steady steps, her bag slung across her shoulder, notebook in hand. The directors were already seated, murmuring among themselves, their expressions carefully schooled but betraying unease. They had seen the live broadcast. They had read the smear articles. They had felt the company's stock dip in real time. At the head of the table sat Martin Doyle, the CEO. His salt and pepper hair was perfectly combed, his suit cut with immaculate precision. He leaned back in his chair with the calm assurance of a man who believed charm and neutrality could shield him from consequence. His lips curved in the faint smirk of someone preparing to play statesman. To his right sat Victor Hayes, the CFO. His eyes were sharp behind thin glasses, his expression cool, detached. He shuffled a stack of papers with the ease of a man accustomed to hiding daggers in spreadsheets. Maya placed her notebook on the table, her movements deliberate. The room fell into a hush. Every eye followed her, waiting for her first word. She pressed a button on the small remote she carried. The speakers hidden in the boardroom ceiling came alive with sound. The voice was unmistakable. Daniel Reeves in the cabin, sharp and humiliating. "You don't belong here." Gasps rose from a few directors who had not heard it unedited, but Maya let the recording play further, her eyes fixed on Hayes. Then it came, the faint but distinct command layered beneath Reeves's voice. "Do it now. Make it clean." The room shifted. Directors exchanged uneasy glances. Doyle's smirk tightened. Hayes's jaw flexed ever so slightly. Maya clicked the remote, pausing the recording. Her voice was calm, her tone precise. 3 separate passenger complaints named Reeves over the past 2 years. All were closed without action, evidence erased. Each time, the conclusion was insufficient documentation. And yet here we are. The pattern speaks for itself. She opened her notebook and slid a printed binder across the table. These are 5 years of passenger complaints involving in-flight discrimination, misconduct, and procedural violations. 217 in total. The system failed to address them because someone made sure it would. The directors flipped through the pages, their faces paling. The scale was undeniable. Doyle leaned forward finally, his voice smooth, carefully measured. "Maya, let us be cautious. We are an airline, not a social experiment. Passengers will always complain. That is the nature of travel. It does not mean misconduct is systemic." Maya clicked the remote again. A new recording filled the room. Doyle's own voice from a previous meeting. "We are an airline, not a social justice workshop. People will complain. Let them." Gasps rose again. 2 newer board members glanced at one another, their shock plain. Doyle's smirk faltered. "My motion is simple," Maya continued, her voice unwavering, effective immediately. "I call for the interim removal of Martin Doyle as CEO pending investigation, and the suspension of Daniel Reeves until independent review is complete. The silence was sharp, brittle. Then the double doors at the far end of the boardroom opened. Daniel Reeves entered, flanked by 2 legal counsel. His face was pale, his jaw tight. "Before you vote," he said, his voice strained, "you should know I was not acting alone." Murmurs erupted. Reeves reached into his pocket and produced a small black earpiece. He held it up for the directors to see. "I was wearing this. I was told what to do, word for word." The voice said, "Do it now. Make it clean." He handed the device to the company's head of technical operations. The man frowned almost immediately. "This is not Horizon-issued equipment. Frequencies are off our standard. It is an external comm device, untraceable through our logs." Maya let the silence stretch, the weight of the revelation sinking in. She turned her gaze toward Hayes, her expression unreadable. Doyle tried to recover. "Even if that is true, it does not absolve Reeves of responsibility." "No," Maya agreed softly. "But it widens the circle of accountability beyond a single scapegoat." The board secretary called for a vote. One by one, hands rose around the table. 7 in favor of Doyle's interim removal. 3 against. 1 abstained. It was done. Doyle's reign was effectively suspended. He leaned back, his eyes narrowing at Maya. "Enjoy your little victory," he muttered as the room stirred. "This isn't the victory," Maya replied quietly. "It's the opening." Her phone buzzed in her bag. She glanced down as Elijah's secure message appeared. "Be ready. Retaliation already moving." She closed the phone slowly, her face unreadable. She had won this round, but she knew the war was just beginning. Hayes had not spoken once during the entire confrontation. His silence was not weakness. It was calculation. He was already planning the next move. As the directors left the room in uneasy clusters, Maya remained seated, her notebook open, her pen in hand. She wrote quickly, capturing the expressions, the tones, the shifts in posture. Details mattered. They always mattered. "Doctor?" Green entered quietly, having been allowed in after the vote concluded. Sure, he sat beside her, his presence a steady anchor. "You did it," he said softly. Maya shook her head. "Not yet. They will come harder now. They already planted the smear about my ownership. Next, they will come after my life outside this company, my family, my history. They will weaponize anything they can find. Dr. Green's voice was calm but resolute. Then you keep doing what you have always done. You stay calm, you stay precise, and you fight with truth." Maya looked at him, her eyes steady. Truth is not enough on its own. You need strategy, and you need timing. She closed her notebook, stood, and walked to the window overlooking the skyline. The city stretched endlessly, alive with its own hum of ambition and corruption. She felt the gravity of the battle pressing against her chest. But she also felt clarity. They had tried to humiliate her. They had tried to silence her. They had tried to erase her. And yet here she stood, not broken, but stronger, sharper. This was no longer just about her seat in two-way. It was about the culture that had allowed voices like Doyle's and hands like Hayes's to shape the fate of millions without accountability. And as she looked out at the horizon, Maya Carter knew one thing with absolute certainty. The game had changed. From this moment on, she was not just playing defense. She was striking back. The boardroom victory carried the sharp taste of adrenaline, but by nightfall Maya Carter felt its cost pressing against her. She returned to her apartment in downtown Atlanta with her bag still slung over her shoulder, her notebook filled with scribbles of names, details, voices. Outside, the city buzzed with its usual rhythm, horns and sirens rising faintly in the humid evening air. But inside, she felt the weight of something darker moving. Her phone vibrated on the counter. Another message from Elijah Grant lit the screen. They're retaliating already. Gossip sites publishing your home address. Photos of you with associates. Twisted out of context. You need to prepare for escalation. Maya's stomach tightened. She opened the link Elijah attached and scrolled. The page was filled with grainy photos of her stepping out of cars, leaving meetings, walking with colleagues. The captions spun innocent moments into sinister narratives. The word shadowy appeared again and again, painting her as a figure with secrets, a woman hidden behind veils of foreign influence. Her pulse quickened as she reached the bottom of the page. There it was, her home address, printed plainly, a violation disguised as journalism. Almost immediately her phone rang. The name flashing on the screen made her heart clench. Aunt Lorraine. She answered quickly. Auntie, are you all right? Her aunt's voice trembled. Maya, a car was outside my house today, parked for hours. They didn't get out, just sat there. Then tonight, the garage caught fire. Maya's knees weakened. She gripped the counter for support. Was anyone hurt? No. The fire department came fast, but it was no accident. I know it wasn't. Maya closed her eyes. Fury and fear mixed in her chest like twin flames. Listen to me. Stay with neighbors for now. I'll send someone to watch the house. Don't be alone. After ending the call, she stood in silence, her breath shallow. Her family was never supposed to be part of this. She had kept them away from the spotlight on purpose, shielding them from the weight of her corporate battles. But now Hayes's reach had extended beyond the boardroom. Her phone buzzed again. This time, Elijah sent a thick file, marked urgent, ran Hayes' financial footprint, found connections. Maya scrolled, her eyes scanning lines of data. Hayes had minority stakes in Sentinel Gate Security. The private firm contracted to manage Horizon's airport screening zones, and in Civic Strategies, the PR firm run by Rachel Knox. Different names, different industries, but the money converged into the same offshore holding. It was a loop. Sentinel controlled who moved through security and what was recorded. Civic Strategies controlled how stories were spun after the fact. Together, they could manufacture incidents, suppress evidence, and reshape narratives. Buried deeper in the file was an audio recording, obtained from a whistleblower inside Sentinel. Maya pressed play, her phone speaker low. The voice that filled the room was the same one she had heard faintly through Reeves's earpiece. Older, authoritative, confident. Do it now. Make it clean. Then came another line, chilling in its casual cruelty. And make sure the garage burns. She'll get the message. Maya froze. The blood drained from her face. Her aunt's garage fire was not random. It had been ordered, orchestrated, carried out as part of the same machinery that had torn her boarding pass. She replayed the clip, her jaw tightening with every word. This was not just about humiliation. This was intimidation, calculated to break her resolve. For a long moment she stood still, staring at the city lights outside her window. Her thoughts twisted in conflict. Do I keep fighting? Do I risk my family, my peace, my life for this? Or do I step back, protect what I love, and let them win? Her grandmother's voice echoed in her memory. Strength is not the absence of fear, child. It is the decision to keep walking through it. Maya opened her notebook and began sketching the structure she now understood. Hayes at the top, Sentinel and Civic as the arms, Reeves as the enforcer, Doyle as the shield. Every piece was connected. A network built not on service, but on silence and control. Her phone buzzed again. Elijah's message was short. "We have enough for the feds. Take it to them." Maya nodded to herself. Enough waiting. Enough silence. It was time to push harder. The next morning, she walked into the Federal Transport Oversight Bureau's downtown office. The lobby was cold, sterile, lined with glass walls and security cameras. She carried a folder thick with evidence, the audio recording loaded onto a secure drive in her bag. An agent met her in a gray suit, his expression unreadable. He led her into a small interview room, closing the door softly behind them. Maya set the folder on the table, her voice calm despite the storm inside her. "This connects Horizon's CFO, Victor Hayes, to coordinated harassment, evidence suppression, and physical intimidation. This is more than misconduct. It's corruption." The agent opened the folder, flipping through the documents. He plugged the drive into his laptop, his brow furrowing as the audio filled the room. The words echoed again. "Do it now. Make it clean. And make sure the garage burns." When the clip ended, the agent sat in silence for a long moment. Then he closed the folder gently. His expression was grave. "We will open an immediate inquiry. This is serious. You may have just exposed something much bigger than you realize." Maya nodded, her chest tight. "I realize." Walking out into the daylight, she felt the warmth of the sun on her skin, but the weight of the battle was heavier than ever. She had delivered the evidence. She had sparked the investigation. Yet she knew Hayes would not sit idle. If anything, the retaliation would grow sharper now that his network had been exposed. Still, she walked with her head high. For the first time, the people pulling the strings had something to lose, and she was going to make sure they lost it all. The days after Maya Carter handed the evidence to the Federal Transport Oversight Bureau were a blur of motion. News outlets scrambled for fragments of truth. Bloggers churned speculation into headlines, and Horizon's PR team tried to stitch a bleeding narrative back together. But beneath the noise, Maya was quiet, almost invisible, watching as the pressure mounted against Victor Hayes. He had not surfaced publicly, but his presence was felt everywhere. Articles whispering about Maya's legitimacy continued to appear. Her ownership questioned again and again. Anonymous voices insisted she was a figurehead for foreign money, a puppet of hidden forces. And each time Maya read one of those pieces, she recognized Hayes' hand. It was his tactic spread doubt, never evidence, until the lie lived long enough to feel true. Elijah Grant called one evening, his voice calm but urgent. "The Bureau is building their case, but Hayes is slippery. If you want him cornered, you cannot rely on slow investigations alone. You need to draw him into the open." Maya listened, her notebook already open, pen ready. "And how do you suggest we do that?" Elijah paused. "Give him bait. Something too tempting to resist. Make him believe he can buy you off." The idea planted itself instantly in her mind. Hayes thrived in shadows, manipulating contracts and controlling stories through proxies. He had always preferred the quiet deals behind closed doors. If she could tempt him into one of those meetings, she might catch the admission she needed. The plan unfolded carefully. An intermediary reached out to Rachel Knox, presenting whispers of an offer Maya might be willing to settle quietly. She was exhausted, they said, weary of the spotlight, eager to return to her life away from headlines. For the right assurances, she would consider making the reforms disappear. It was a calculated lie, and it worked. Within 48 hours, Rachel responded with interest. A private meeting could be arranged. A high-end hotel suite downtown. No press, no board members, no lawyers outside the inner circle, just a conversation to end the noise. Maya prepared meticulously. She met with bureau agents in secret, providing them with the secure location and time. The suite was wired in advance, cameras hidden in air vents, microphones tucked under the marble table, even a fiber optic lens threaded into the chandelier above. Every angle would be captured, every word recorded. On the evening of the meeting, Maya dressed in muted tones, her posture deliberately weary. She carried herself with the air of someone tired of fighting, someone who might be willing to bargain for peace. Her calm mask hid the steel burning beneath. The suite's double doors opened at precisely 7. Rachel entered first, her heels clicking sharply against the polished floor. Her face carried that same professional poise, but her eyes flickered with satisfaction. She believed victory was close. Victor Hayes followed. He wore a dark suit, understated but expensive, his tie loose as though he wanted to project casual confidence. He did not bother with pleasantries. He moved straight to the table and placed a folder in front of Maya. "Here is how this works," Hayes said, his voice calm, deliberate. "We make this noise disappear. In return, you ensure my partners take over the ground service contracts in 3 major hubs. No oversight committee, no compliance training, no independent review. A clean slate for everyone." Rachel slid into a seat beside him, adding smoothly, "It is a win for all parties. You walk away richer, freer, and the press never hears another word." Maya opened the folder slowly, her eyes scanning the contracts inside. They were detailed, already prepared, as though the outcome had been decided before she even stepped into the room. She let silence stretch before speaking, her voice soft, hesitant, and the incident on Flight 221. The words Reeves spoke, the order he claimed he received. Hayes leaned back, a smirk tugging at his mouth. Doyle was the perfect shield. Everyone assumed it was his arrogance. But the voice in that earpiece, he tapped his own ear casually. "That was mine." One move to remove a problem passenger and tighten control over who really runs this airline. From the tarmac up, Maya's pulse pounded in her ears, but her face remained carefully neutral. Inside, she felt the recording devices humming, capturing every syllable. She let the silence linger, as though considering, then finally said, "It is tempting, but I do not make decisions without my lawyer." That was the cue. The suite doors burst open. Federal agents flooded the room, badges flashing, their voices sharp. Hayes's smirk vanished, replaced by the shock of a man realizing his own cleverness had betrayed him. Rachel froze, her hands lifting instinctively, her professional mask fracturing into panic. Agents secured the folder, collected the hidden contracts, and confirmed the recordings from the microphones. Hayes tried to speak, his words stumbling, but the evidence was undeniable. His admission hung heavy in the room, preserved in digital clarity. By nightfall, Hayes was charged with fraud, collusion, and multiple counts of corporate misconduct. Rachel was taken in for questioning. Her ties to Sentinel Gate security and civic strategies now threads in a much larger investigation. Maya left the hotel quietly, the night air cool against her skin. She walked alone to her car, her notebook pressed against her chest. The trap had worked. The network was beginning to unravel, but she knew it was not the end. For all his arrogance, Hayes was only one man. There were others who had profited from his web of control, others who would try to fill the vacuum his downfall created. And though Martin Doyle had been suspended, his smirk haunted her thoughts. He had allowed the culture to fester, shielded the system with his neutrality, and benefited from the silence. As she drove through the city streets, Maya reflected on the cost of what had just unfolded. Hayes had aimed directly at her family. He had tried to burn her resolve with threats and intimidation. Instead, he had lit a fire that would consume him. She thought again of her grandmother's words. Strength is the decision to keep walking through fear. And tonight, Maya had walked through it, step by step, until fear belonged to someone else. The news of Victor Hayes' arrest spread faster than the flames that had consumed Aunt Lorraine's garage. Morning broadcasts led with his face, stern and pale, as he was escorted by agents out of the hotel suite. Commentators dissected every word of the indictment, while stock analysts speculated about Horizon Air's future. For the first time in weeks, Maya Carter did not feel like she was the one under siege. The tide had shifted, if only slightly. Still, she knew better than to relax. Hayes might have been exposed, but the system he had nurtured was still alive. Martin Doyle remained suspended, his influence lingering through allies who clung to him like vines to a weakened tree. The culture of silence he had fostered could not be undone with a single arrest. Maya arrived at Horizon's downtown tower early the next day, her notebook tucked under her arm, her steps measured. Reporters swarmed the lobby, their questions flying like arrows. She moved past them with the quiet dignity she had cultivated since the confrontation began. Elevators carried her upward, each floor a reminder of the company she was fighting to reshape. The press conference had been scheduled for noon, but before then, Maya gathered a small group in a side conference room. Elijah Grant was there, steady as always, his calm presence a ballast. Dr. Thomas Green had agreed to speak as a witness, and Sophia Alvarez, the young flight attendant who had risked herself to slip Maya the falsified ID, sat nervously at the edge of the table. Maya turned her attention to Sophia first. "You stood up when it mattered," she said gently. "That card you gave me unraveled the deception. You should not have had to make that choice alone." Sophia's voice was quiet, almost trembling. "I thought I was going to lose my job. When I saw Reeves tearing your boarding pass, I felt sick, but I was afraid. I did not know if anyone would believe me." Maya reached across the table, resting her hand over Sophia's. "Courage is not the absence of fear. It is doing what is right, even while fear is burning inside you. You did not fail. You showed who you are." Tears welled in Sophia's eyes, but she blinked them back quickly. Elijah cleared his throat, bringing the focus back. "The Oversight Bureau is moving, but corporate reforms must begin now. If we wait for investigations to finish, Doyle's people will regroup. We need to act." Maya opened her notebook, flipping to a page marked with careful bullet points. "We start with transparency. Every passenger complaint from the past 5 years will be released. Every unresolved case will be reopened. No more disappearing grievances. Doctor," Green nodded firmly, "people will believe in this company again only if they see justice applied consistently. No secrecy," Maya continued, her tone precise. "Second, mandatory bias and cultural competency training for all staff and management. Completion tied to promotions, bonuses, and continued employment. No one will treat it as optional." Sophia looked startled. "Even executives, especially executives." Maya replied, "It starts at the top, or it is meaningless." She turned another page. Third, a new service-level agreement for complaints. Strict deadlines, transparency checkpoints, independent audits. No more hiding behind insufficient evidence stamps. Elijah smiled faintly. "You have thought of everything." Maya's eyes softened, but her voice was resolute. This is not just about protecting passengers. It is about rewriting the culture. Horizon must become the standard others follow, not the example they use for what to avoid. By noon, the press conference room was packed. Reporters filled every chair, cameras lined the back wall, microphones crowded the podium. Maya stepped forward, flanked by Elijah and Dr. Green. Sophia lingered just behind, her presence quiet but powerful. Maya placed a thick binder on the podium, the weight of it echoing as it landed. She opened it to the first page, her gaze steady as she addressed the crowd. This is the complete record of every unresolved passenger complaint from the past 5 years. 217 in total. Each one closed without action. Each one dismissed without accountability. Today, that changes. Gas rippled through the room. She clicked a button, and a projection filled the wall behind her. Names, dates, case numbers appeared in rows, a pattern of neglect made visible. Elijah stepped in then, his calm voice outlining the reform plan. 90 days. That is our timeline. Bias training for all employees. New complaint resolution standards. An independent oversight council. And performance-based incentives tied directly to customer satisfaction. Reporters scribbled furiously. Cameras zoomed closer. The momentum in the room was palpable, a current shifting in real time. Then Maya clicked to the next slide, marked Case Study. The name displayed was Sophia Alvarez. Sophia's breath caught. Maya spoke clearly. 3 years ago, Sophia was nearly terminated for a supposed procedural error. The investigation found no wrongdoing, but the blemish remained on her record. This week, we pulled the original HR log. It showed that her file had been altered by Daniel Reeves. The modification carried an authorization code belonging to Victor Hayes. The room fell silent. Every reporter leaned forward, their faces sharp with focus. Maya turned, looking directly at Sophia. You are officially cleared of all allegations, and effective today, you are promoted to Vice President of Customer Experience. The Independent Oversight Council will report directly to you. For a moment, Sophia stood, frozen, shock written across her face. Then her hand rose to her mouth, tears spilling freely as the room erupted into applause. Cameras flashed, capturing her stunned expression, her trembling smile. The energy in the room transformed instantly. What had begun as another press conference had become something else, something rare, a moment of visible justice. By the time Maya stepped down from the podium, the shift in public sentiment was undeniable. News alerts described a bold transparency offensive. Social media feeds that had been skeptical now flooded with support. Hashtags celebrating Horizon's reforms trended globally. Civic Strategies, Rachel Knox's firm, could spin whatever they wanted. Against hard data and public reform, their whispers turned to dust. Later that evening, Maya sat alone in her office, the city glowing beyond the glass windows. She opened her notebook and wrote in slow, careful strokes. One battle won. The war continues. A knock came at the door. Sophia entered, still radiant, her eyes red from tears but shining with resolve. I do not know how to thank you, she said softly. Maya closed the notebook, meeting her gaze. You do not need to thank me. You earned this. Now it is your turn to lead. Sophia nodded, her voice steady now. I will not waste it. I promise. As the door closed behind her, Maya leaned back in her chair, her mind circling. Hayes was gone, but Doyle remained. The machine of silence and intimidation was wounded, not destroyed. She knew retaliation would not stop with Hayes' arrest. Doyle still had allies, still had influence, and men like him never surrendered easily. She let her gaze linger on the city lights one last time before closing her notebook. Tomorrow, the fight would continue. But tonight, for the first time, she allowed herself a moment of quiet pride, because against humiliation, against fear, against threats meant to burn her resolve to ash, Maya Carter had built something stronger. A new order was beginning, one shaped not by silence, but by courage. The weeks following Victor Hayes' arrest were a whirlwind. Horizon Air's name filled every news cycle, but for the first time in months, the story was shifting toward renewal instead of scandal. Passengers spoke about accountability. Investors noted cautious optimism. Employees whispered with something that had been missing for years, hope. Yet Maya Carter knew that renewal would not come without resistance. Martin Doyle, though suspended, was not a man who accepted irrelevance. He had spent decades shaping the airline's culture of denial. His allies remained on the fringes of the board, executives who owed him favors, employees who feared his return. And then there were the media leaks, subtle pieces designed to keep Maya painted as divisive, unstable, too emotional for leadership. She recognized his fingerprints in every whisper. The final confrontation arrived not in a courtroom, but in another boardroom. This time, the setting was different. No glass table stretching into infinity. No skyline designed to intimidate. Instead, a modest hall had been rented for Horizon's emergency shareholder assembly. Rows of chairs filled with reporters, employees, and representatives of passenger advocacy groups. Cameras lined the back wall. There would be no secrets here. Maya stood at the podium, her binder of reforms at her side, her posture calm. She wore no jewelry, no bright colors, only a navy suit that blended authority with quiet resolve. Elijah Grant sat in the front row, steady as always. Sophia Alvarez, now Vice President of Customer Experience, was beside him. Dr. Thomas Green had flown back in to stand as an independent witness, his notebook ready. The chair of the assembly opened with formality, then handed the floor to Martin Doyle. The former CEO stepped up, still carrying the aura of command. His smile was polished, his voice as smooth as ever. "I want to remind everyone," Doyle began, "that Horizon Air became what it is under my leadership. We expanded routes, modernized our fleet, and reached record profits. Now, I see us drifting into chaos. Reforms are important. Yes, but not when they destabilize our very foundation. What our competitor airlines are watching is not strength, but disorder." He paused, letting his words settle like bait in the air. Several executives nodded faintly, their loyalty flickering. Doyle continued, his voice sharpening. "And let us not ignore the question of ownership. Miss Carter's shares may appear legitimate on paper, but unanswered questions linger. Do we really know who she represents? Is this company being handed over to outside interests under the guise of reform?" A ripple of murmurs moved through the room. Doyle's old strategy, insinuation without evidence, still carried weight. Cameras leaned closer. Reporters scribbled notes eagerly. Maya waited until the noise settled. Then she stepped forward, her voice quiet, but firm enough to carry. "I expected nothing less. When truth threatens power, power always reaches for rumor. When accountability arrives, those who benefited from silence insist the price is too high." She opened her binder and held up a single page. "This is a federal certification of my holdings. Every share documented, every acquisition vetted. There is no shadow consortium, no foreign master behind my name. There is only me. And what I represent is a future where passengers are not humiliated, where employees are not silenced, and where misconduct is not swept under the rug." Applause broke out, first hesitant, then stronger as it rippled through the audience. Doyle's jaw tightened. Maya pressed on. What Doyle calls disorder is simply sunlight. Sunlight reveals what has been hidden. It disinfects corruption. It burns away the excuses of men who told us passengers were just complainers and employees were just expendable. She turned to Sophia, gesturing toward her. This is our new vice president of customer experience. She was once nearly fired because her file was altered by the very men Doyle protected. Today she leads the oversight council that will ensure passengers are heard. Sophia rose, tears in her eyes, and the applause swelled louder. Maya's voice deepened, resonant. And this is only the beginning. Bias training will reach every level, from the newest flight attendant to the highest executive. Complaints will no longer vanish. Each one will be tracked, audited, and addressed. And to ensure the future of aviation reflects the world we live in, I am announcing the Pierce Scholarship Fund, named after my grandmother. It will provide training for underrepresented communities to enter both aviation and hospitality. No one should ever be told they do not belong. The applause this time was thunderous, rising like a wave. Cameras flashed in rapid bursts. Doyle stepped forward, desperate now, his voice raised. Do not be fooled. These promises will cripple us. Our profits will vanish under the weight of bureaucracy. This is sentiment, not strategy. Maya turned to him calmly, her eyes steady. Profit built on humiliation is not strength. Efficiency that silences justice is not sustainability. You called this sentiment, I call it survival. For Horizon to thrive, it must belong to everyone who boards its planes, not just the few who profit from its shadows. The assembly chair rose, calling for a vote. Hands lifted across the room, one after another. It was overwhelming. By a margin of more than 2/3, the reforms were ratified. Doyle was stripped of all remaining authority. The culture he had built cracked in public view, exposed for what it had always been. Doyle's face drained of color. For once, the practiced smirk failed him. He gathered his papers and left the podium without another word. Maya remained standing. She let the applause wash over her, but inside her chest she felt something deeper than triumph. She felt relief, sorrow, pride, and resolve all braided together. The road ahead would not be easy. Reforms would meet resistance. The culture would take years to truly shift, but the moment had arrived. The old order was gone. A new one had begun. Later that evening, after the crowds dispersed and the cameras turned off, Maya walked alone through Horizon's training center. The halls echoed with the muffled sounds of employees preparing for the first wave of cultural training. Posters lined the walls, celebrating diversity, inclusion, and respect. She stopped before a new installation, a wall of portraits honoring the most outstanding customer champions of the year. Among them was Sofia Alvarez, her smile radiant, her story now part of the company's foundation. Maya reached out, brushing her fingers lightly against the frame. For a moment she closed her eyes, remembering her grandmother's voice. Travel can connect worlds, but only if the journey belongs to everyone. She stepped back, breathing deeply, for all the battles fought, for all the nights spent questioning if silence would be easier. This was the answer. The rules had changed, and this time they were built to last. Sometimes the deepest wounds do not come from strangers, but from the systems meant to serve us. Maya Carter's journey reminds us that silence is not weakness, it is a choice. And when the moment comes, a voice can shatter walls built over decades. Her fight began in the narrow aisle of a plane, but it ended by rewriting the culture of an entire airline. This story is a mirror. It reflects the cruelty of prejudice, the arrogance of unchecked power, and the pain of those forced to endure it. But it also reflects resilience, compassion, and the possibility of change. From humiliation to reform, from whispered doubt to undeniable truth, Maya stood not just for herself, but for everyone who has ever been told they do not belong. Let this ending not be closure, but a call to speak, to act, to demand better, because injustice thrives only when it believes we are too tired to fight. If this story moved you, do not let it end here. Like the video, share it so others can see, and subscribe to the channel so together we can keep telling stories that challenge, inspire, and demand a better world.